Good day. In this revision session, we will build a smart checklist for UPSC Prelims 2026. The goal is simple. If you are short on time, you should still know what to revise first. And if you have already studied, this script will help you convert scattered reading into a clean, exam-ready list. Prelims does not ask only static facts. It often asks about reports, indices, surveys, rankings, and institutions. Many students lose marks not because they do not study, but because they revise too late or revise too broadly. So today, we will focus on what matters most: high-yield reports, major indices, and the correct way to revise them without panic. Keep one thing in mind. For prelims, you do not need to memorize every number of every report. You need to know the name, the issuing body, the broad subject, and the exam relevance. That is the real strategy. We will also cover common mistakes, such as confusing one index with another or remembering the wrong institution. This is a revision checklist, so listen once fully, then listen again during your final revision week. First, let us understand why reports and indices matter so much. UPSC and other competitive exams use them because they test awareness of governance, economy, environment, social development, health, and international positioning. A report is usually a document published by a government body, international organization, or research institution. An index is a ranking tool. It compares countries, states, or sectors using selected indicators. For example, an index may measure hunger, gender equality, climate performance, logistics efficiency, or innovation capacity. A survey is slightly different. It usually collects data from a sample and presents patterns or perceptions. For UPSC prelims, the danger is simple. Many titles sound similar. A student may mix up one report with another or one index with another. So the correct approach is not brute force memorization. The correct approach is category-wise revision. Ask 4 questions for every report or index. 1. Who publishes it? 2. What is the subject? 3. What broad trend or issue does it reflect? 4. Why could UPSC ask it? If you answer these 4 questions, you are already ahead of many candidates. Let us begin with the first major area: economy and development reports. These are often high yield because they connect policy with data. The most important official source here is the Economic Survey, published by the Ministry of Finance before the Union Budget. It is not exactly a prelims-only document. It gives the big picture of India's economy. You should know that it is a government publication, and it often becomes useful for both prelims and mains. Then comes the Union Budget, which is also crucial for schemes, taxation, expenditure, and government priorities. From the international side, students should keep track of reports from the World Bank, IMF, OECD, and UN agencies, but only at the level of subject and broad takeaway. For example, if the question is about poverty, inflation, human development, or inequality, the institution matters more than a number. Another very useful revision habit is to remember the difference between a report and a ranking. A report explains. A ranking compares. A survey can do both, but it is still usually based on a specific methodology. Do not try to remember every economic report in isolation. Group them by theme: growth, inflation, poverty, employment, industry, and external sector. This makes revision faster and less confusing. Now let us move to one of the most tested areas: social development and global development indices. These are very important because they are repeatedly used in exam questions. Common themes include human development, gender equality, education, nutrition, health, poverty, and multidimensional well-being. You should revise the human development related reports and indices from the UN system, especially the UNDP's human development reports. Remember the basic idea. Human development is not only income, it also includes education and health. Then revise the global gender gap type of indexes from the World Economic Forum. The theme here is gender parity, meaning the gap between men and women in opportunities and outcomes. Also revise hunger and food security related reports, often connected with FAO or other UN agencies. Here the key idea is whether a country is improving or facing stress in nutrition and food access. For competitive exams, the most useful memory trick is to link the index with the policy issue. If it is human development, think education and health. If it is gender, think participation and opportunity. If it is hunger, think nutrition and food access. If it is inequality, think income distribution and social inclusion. This is better than learning random names alone. Another major block is governance, democracy, and institutional performance. These questions are common because they connect administration with current affairs. You should revise reports related to corruption perception, press freedom, democracy, rule of law, and government effectiveness only at the broad level. The exact publisher matters. For example, some are from private global organizations, some from international nonprofits, and some from intergovernmental institutions. For UPSC, the more important skill is to identify the theme correctly. Is the report measuring transparency? Is it measuring civil liberties? Is it measuring administrative quality? Is it measuring democratic participation? This matters because a question may ask the purpose of the index, not the exact rank. Also revise electoral and constitutional institutions from India. For instance, the Election Commission, CAG, Lok Sabha, Rajya Sabha, Finance Commission, and Niti Aayog often appear in conceptual questions. They may not always be in the form of a report, but they are part of governance revision. Remember this simple point. Governance questions often test whether you know the role of institutions, not just names. If a report is about administrative reform, ask, which institution in India would be relevant to that issue? This makes your revision more analytical and exam safe. Next is environment and climate, a very high-yield revision zone. Here, students often confuse reports on climate performance, emissions, biodiversity, forests, pollution, and disaster risk. You should revise the basic purpose of each report or index, not just its name. For example, climate-related reports may assess emissions trends, adaptation readiness, or climate policy performance. Biodiversity-related reports may focus on species, ecosystems, and conservation pressure. Pollution reports may measure air quality or environmental health indicators. Disaster-related reports may assess exposure and vulnerability. Also keep Indian institutions in mind. The Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, the Central Pollution Control Board, and the India State of Forest Report are important for India-specific environment revision. If a question asks about forest cover, biodiversity, or conservation, do not jump to a random international report. Check whether the source is Indian or global. This is a common exam trap. Another useful revision line is this. Environment questions often mix static and current affairs. So if you revise major conventions, key species, protected areas, and official Indian reports together, your recall becomes much stronger. Let us now take a short recap. For economy, focus on official government documents and major multilateral reports. For social development, focus on human development, gender, hunger, health, education, and poverty-related indices. For governance, focus on democracy, corruption, transparency, and institutional performance. For environment, focus on climate, biodiversity, forests, pollution, and disaster related reports. At this stage, do not chase every new headline. Instead, make a one-page list under each theme. Under each report, write 4 things only: the publisher, the subject, the Indian or global link, and one line on why it matters. That is enough for prelims revision. If you try to write full paragraphs, you will waste time and forget faster. The real skill is clean compression. Now let us shift to India-specific official reports and surveys, because these are especially useful for competitive exams. The Economic Survey and Union Budget, as already mentioned, are top priorities. In addition, revision should include official sectoral reports and statistics from ministries and statutory bodies. For example, MOSPI publishes important data on national accounts and surveys. RBI publishes useful financial stability and monetary policy related material. Niti Aayog publishes policy documents and indices related to states, health, innovation, and development. The important thing is not to memorize every report name separately. The important thing is to know the institution and its role. RBI is connected with money, banking, inflation, and financial stability. MOSPI is connected with statistics and economic data. Niti Aayog is connected with policy and development. This is a very practical prelims trick. If you see a report on inflation, think RBI or government data. If you see a report on growth, think MOSPI or Ministry of Finance. If you see a report on state performance, think Niti Aayog. If you learn the institution map, many questions become easier even when the exact report is unfamiliar. A separate revision point is indices and rankings related to states. These often appear because they are easier for exam setters to frame as objective questions. Examples include health, innovation, logistics, school education, sustainable development, and governance-related rankings that compare states or districts. The first rule is to identify whether the ranking is national or international. The second rule is to identify whether the unit is a country, state, district, or city. The third rule is to identify the theme. Many students know the name but forget what exactly is being ranked. That creates confusion. For example, if an index measures innovation, it is not the same as one measuring ease of doing business, and it is not the same as one measuring sustainable development. Do not memorize them as a long list only. Group them by subject. Also remember that UPSC may ask questions about the methodology or the purpose of the index. So revise the meaning of each broad term. Innovation means new ideas, research, and technological development. Logistics means movement of goods and efficiency of transport. Sustainable development means balancing growth, environment, and social well-being. Health rankings usually involve access, outcomes, and system quality. This conceptual clarity is enough to solve many prelims questions. Now let us discuss international organizations and their flagship reports, because these are repeatedly asked in prelims. The best approach is to revise the organization and its broad subject area. For example, the UNDP is associated with human development. The World Bank is associated with development economics, poverty, and global data. The IMF is associated with macroeconomics, global financial stability, and fiscal outlook. The WHO is associated with health. The FAO is associated with food and agriculture. The ILO is associated with labor and employment. The UNESCO is associated with education, culture, and heritage. The UNEP is associated with environment. The WMO is associated with weather and climate. Once you know this mapping, many report and index questions become manageable. If the question says, which organization publishes a report on world employment trends, you do not need to guess randomly. You can connect labor with the ILO. If the question is about nutrition, food security, or agriculture, you can think FAO or related UN bodies. This is why institution-based revision is stronger than memorizing headlines alone. Let us talk about common mistakes. First, students often confuse the issuing body with the topic. For example, they remember the report title, but not who publishes it. That is dangerous in prelims. Second, they remember the year, but not the theme. That is also risky. Third, they mix up global and Indian reports. Fourth, they over-focus on sensational rankings and ignore stable official documents. Fifth, they try to read too many new articles in the last week and forget the older high-yield material. The correct revision method is simple. Make a master sheet with 5 columns: report or index name, publisher, topic, India relevance, and one-line takeaway. Then do spaced revision. Revise once today, once after 3 days, once after 1 week, and once before the exam. Short, repeated revision works better than one long reading session. Also, when you revise, ask yourself one exam question for each item. For example, what does this index measure? Which organization publishes it? Why is it in the news? This active recall method is much more effective than passive reading. Let us end with a final last-minute revision checklist for UPSC Prelims 2026. 1. Revise the economic survey and union budget basics. 2. Revise major social development themes: human development, gender, health, hunger, education, and poverty. 3. Revise governance and democracy-related institutions and reports. 4. Revise environment and climate reports, especially those connected with forests, biodiversity, pollution, and climate action. 5. Revise India-specific official sources from RBI, MOSPI, Niti Aayog, PIB, and major ministries. 6. Revise the main UN and global institutions and what each one generally covers. 7. Do not memorize random numbers unless they are stable and verified. 8. Revise by theme, not only by title. 9. Always check whether a report is Indian or global. 10. In the final week, focus on accuracy and repetition, not on collecting new material. If you remember only one thing from the script, remember this: Prelims rewards organized revision. A small, clear, repeated checklist is much stronger than a huge, unread pile of notes. Keep your sources official, keep your notes short, and keep revising. That is the safest way to convert current affairs into marks.